Valletta, 2:14 a.m. The night sky over Malta glowed with fire. For a heartbeat, it looked like dawn. Then the earth itself shook. A blinding flash rose into the heavens, followed by a towering mushroom cloud. The entire island, its cities, its harbors, its people, was erased in a single instant. Across Europe, sensors screamed. Across the Atlantic, emergency lines lit up. The world's worst nightmare had come true. A nuclear weapon had detonated in the heart of the Mediterranean. But the truth was even stranger. It wasn't supposed to happen. The missile had been intercepted, shot down before impact, and yet the interception triggered the unthinkable. This is the story of the day Malta disappeared, and how one miscalculation brought the world closer to global annihilation than ever before. The order came from deep inside Russia's hardened command bunkers. To the outside world, it would be explained as a strategic exercise, another test of Moscow's ability to project nuclear power. But to NATO, it was a direct threat, the launch of a live warhead aimed westward across the Mediterranean. At precisely 1:47 a.m. GMT, satellites picked up the heat plume. A missile roared into the sky from a launch site near the Volga, its flames splitting the darkness as it ascended beyond the atmosphere. Analysts immediately identified the trajectory, a long arc toward Europe. Its exact target was unclear: Madrid, Rome, Paris? But the implication was unmistakable. A Russian nuclear weapon was in the air. The Pentagon moved instantly. Across underground command centers in Colorado, alarms blared. Confirmed launch, hostile trajectory, operators repeated. Lines lit up to Brussels, London, and Paris. In the skies over the Mediterranean, American Aegis destroyers and NATO radar systems locked on. The decision was made: intercept. At 2:02 a.m., the order was given. U.S. Navy warships stationed near Sicily fired a volley of SM-3 interceptors. Each missile streaked upward, climbing into the black heavens, hunting for the incoming Russian warhead. High above the clouds, the two forces met. The impact came like lightning. A flash erupted as the interceptor collided with the warhead's casing. For a split second, command centers cheered. The missile had been neutralized. Europe had been saved. Then came the horror. Instead of disintegrating harmlessly, the warhead detonated. The interception had destabilized its trigger mechanism. A nuclear fireball bloomed, not above a target city, but directly over Malta. The island was swallowed in a sun-bright explosion, the detonation flattening Valletta and everything around it in less than a second. Shockwaves ripped across the sea, slamming into Sicily and North Africa. Windows shattered in Tunis. Streets cracked in Palermo. The Mediterranean boiled under the blast. In Brussels, NATO commanders froze. The warhead had been destroyed, but the cost was unimaginable. An entire nation, a NATO member, was gone. In Moscow, state media declared it a provocation, accusing the United States of triggering the explosion. Officials insisted the missile was part of a routine drill, never meant to detonate. The Kremlin pointed to Malta's destruction as evidence of Washington's recklessness. But the world wasn't listening. Across Europe, panic erupted. Millions turned to their phones, watching images of the mushroom cloud rising over the sea. Families fled cities, convinced more strikes were coming. Social media filled with a single word: Armageddon. In Washington, the president addressed the nation. His face was pale, his tone grim. "We prevented a direct strike on Europe," he said, "but Malta has paid the ultimate price." He vowed retaliation if another missile was launched. Behind the calm words, generals debated whether this was already the beginning of nuclear war. And so, in less than 1 hour, the unthinkable had happened. Russia had launched a missile. The U.S. had intercepted it. Malta was gone. The world was now standing on the edge of a precipice, staring into the abyss of global annihilation. The images raced across the globe before dawn. A glowing mushroom cloud rising over the Mediterranean. A fireball where Malta had once been. Satellite photos confirmed the unthinkable. The island was gone, its coastline erased, its capital city nothing but ash. In Europe, panic erupted instantly. Millions awoke to breaking news alerts. Nuclear detonation confirmed in Malta. In Rome, sirens wailed as crowds surged into the streets, desperate for trains heading north. In Athens, supermarkets filled within minutes, people fighting for bottled water and fuel. In Paris and Berlin, highways jammed with cars fleeing cities, terrified that they would be the next targets. Financial markets collapsed at opening. The euro plunged, oil soared, and stock exchanges froze trading as panic spread. Airlines grounded fleets fearing further strikes. Across the continent, silence hung in the skies where flights had once crisscrossed. Europe, for the first time since 1945, felt the cold grip of nuclear terror. In Washington, the Situation Room buzzed with chaos. The president convened the National Security Council within minutes. "We intercepted a live Russian missile," an admiral reported, but the detonation occurred above Malta. The president slammed his fist on the table. "We saved Rome, Paris, or Madrid, but we lost an ally. NATO territory, a country wiped off the map." The question hung heavy. Was this an accident or an act of war? Moscow responded with fury. Russian state television claimed the missile had been unarmed, part of a routine drill. Officials accused the United States of deliberately striking it to fabricate a crisis. Kremlin spokesman insisted that Washington, not Moscow, bore responsibility for Malta's destruction. "You destroyed your own ally," one Russian general sneered on camera. But few believed it. The world saw the launch, the interception, the mushroom cloud. The logic was irrelevant. The devastation was real. And the narrative spread. Russia had fired, America had reacted, and Malta had ceased to exist. In NATO headquarters in Brussels, military leaders demanded answers. "Is this war?" asked one general. Another slammed his folder shut. "It doesn't matter. It feels like war, and the public will not forgive hesitation." Governments across Europe invoked Article 5 consultations, calling Malta's annihilation an attack on all. Yet division spread as quickly as fear. Eastern allies, Poland, the Baltics, demanded immediate retaliation, a massive strike against Russian missile forces. Western leaders, France, Germany, urged restraint, fearing escalation into global annihilation. "If we respond in kind," warned Berlin, "Moscow may fire again, and this time the target won't be an island." Meanwhile, protests filled the streets. In London, crowds chanted for revenge, waving Maltese flags and demanding a nuclear response. In Madrid, chaos turned violent as rumors spread that more missiles were inbound. In New York, thousands gathered outside the United Nations, screaming for accountability. Across Asia, capitals trembled. Beijing urged calm dialogue, but quietly mobilized its navy, fearing a spillover conflict. Tokyo activated civil defense drills, the first since the Cold War. In Delhi, analysts warned that if Europe burns, Asia will follow. The destruction of Malta was no longer just a European crisis. It was a global alarm bell. In Valletta, there was nothing left to save. Rescue teams searching from Sicily found only ruins and radioactive waters. Drone footage showed a blackened crater where the city had stood. Ships capsized in the harbor, no signs of survivors. A nation had been erased in seconds, its people vaporized, its culture turned to dust. The shockwaves were not only physical but psychological. The world had seen the fragility of civilization exposed in one terrible flash. By nightfall, the Mediterranean glowed with fleets. American carriers circled south of Sicily. French submarines prowled the depths. British destroyers guarded Gibraltar. And on the other side, Russian warships massed near the Black Sea, their missile tubes loaded, their radar scanning. The world stood on a knife's edge. NATO debated retaliation. Russia denied responsibility. Civilians fled cities, fearing the next flash. Malta had vanished, and with it, the illusion of safety. The escalation was complete. The question now was simple and terrifying. Would this be remembered as the worst accident in history, or the first shot of World War III? The third day after Malta's annihilation began with silence, the kind of silence that comes before history changes forever. In Brussels, NATO's council chamber buzzed with tension. 29 flags lined the room, but every delegate spoke with the same raw emotion: anger, fear, and the demand for action. The Maltese seat sat draped in black cloth. The generals presented two options. First, a limited retaliation. Conventional strikes against Russian launch sites, naval bases, and airfields, designed to cripple Moscow's ability to repeat the disaster. Second, full escalation. A nuclear response under the terms of Article 5, a mirror to the horror that had erased Malta. The words hung like daggers in the air. Nuclear retaliation. For the first time since the Cold War, those words were spoken, not as theory, but as possibility. In Moscow, the Kremlin called the NATO debate madness. State television flooded the air with claims that the missile was never armed, that Malta's destruction was the result of an American mistake. But Russian forces mobilized regardless. Satellite images showed mobile ICBM launchers rolling out of hidden bunkers, fleets of bombers dispersing to remote airfields, and submarines vanishing beneath the Arctic ice. Denial in words, preparation in deeds. Washington grew restless. The president addressed the nation again, his tone darker than before. Malta was NATO soil. An attack on one is an attack on all. We will not let this pass unanswered. Behind him, his Joint Chiefs whispered heatedly, "Strike now or risk appearing weak." The Pentagon's screens glowed with target packages, missile silos, radar sites, command bunkers. At any moment, a single order could send hundreds of tomahawks roaring east. Europe braced for impact. Cities prepared for evacuation. Berlin ordered shelters reopened, a haunting echo of the 1940s. In London, military convoys rolled through the streets, while families stocked basements with water and food. In Paris, church bells rang in mourning as candles flickered for Malta. But the chants in the crowd outside the Élysée Palace were not for peace. They were for vengeance. And then came the breaking point. At 14:37 GMT, NATO radars detected another Russian missile launch. Screens filled with alarms, trajectories plotted in seconds. The target appeared to be the Mediterranean again. Commanders shouted for intercept protocols, destroyers braced to fire. But within minutes, the track vanished. False alarm, a malfunctioning satellite, or perhaps deliberate Russian jamming. For those tense minutes, though, the world truly stood on the edge. Inside NATO command, the debate boiled over. Polish and Baltic representatives demanded an immediate counterstrike, arguing that every minute of delay invited more aggression. France and Germany urged caution, warning that a misstep could doom half the continent. Britain, still mourning its citizens lost in Malta's blast fallout, leaned toward action. The alliance was united in grief but divided in strategy. Meanwhile, the seas grew crowded. American carriers circled south of Crete, their decks buzzing with aircraft armed and fueled. French submarines prowled the Tyrrhenian depths, prepared to unleash nuclear-tipped torpedoes if the order came. Russian fleets massed in the Black Sea and the Barents, their radars searching, their missile tubes open. The Mediterranean, once filled with tourists and trade, had become the staging ground for Armageddon. The world's media could hardly keep pace. Screens showed burning candles in Valletta's ruins, paired with live feeds of NATO jets screaming into the sky. Analysts argued in panicked voices, was this the end of restraint? Would Malta's name be remembered as Sarajevo was in 1914, the spark that set the world ablaze? And yet, even as the machines of war ground into position, hesitation lingered. Leaders on both sides knew that one miscalculation could erase not one island, but entire nations. Malta had vanished in a flash, but if another warhead detonated, it could be Berlin, London, or Moscow next. As dusk fell, the Mediterranean horizon glowed with the silhouettes of fleets locked in a deadly stare. Nuclear warheads sat armed in their silos. Fighter pilots waited in cockpits for orders that might never come. Presidents and generals held trembling phones, one decision away from catastrophe. The culmination was here. The question no longer was whether the world could avoid war, but whether in the shadow of Malta's destruction, anyone still had the will to stop it. The night after Malta's destruction was the longest in modern history. Europe did not sleep, nor did America, nor Russia. The Mediterranean glowed with fleets poised for war, their radars sweeping, their launch tubes primed. The world waited for a single mistake to ignite the end of civilization. And then at the very edge of catastrophe came a pause. In Brussels, NATO's War Council broke for the first time in 36 hours. Exhausted generals stepped away from their maps. Heads of state, voices hoarse from argument, stepped into private calls with Washington, London, Paris. A single idea emerged from the chaos. One chance for de-escalation, a line that could still be walked back before the abyss. The President of the United States spoke to the world at dawn. His words carried the weight of a trembling planet. We stand ready to defend every inch of NATO territory, but we do not seek the destruction of humanity. The annihilation of Malta is a crime that cannot be undone. What can be done is this: the prevention of another. In Moscow, the Kremlin responded with its own broadcast. The Russian leader, stone-faced, declared that the launch had been a training exercise sabotaged by reckless American interception. He denied any intent to strike Europe, denied responsibility for the nuclear blast. But beneath his words was something new, a plea, almost hidden. He too feared that another hour of escalation would doom the world. Diplomats scrambled in the shadows. Back channels lit up between Washington and Moscow, old Cold War hotlines buzzing for the first time in decades. Switzerland offered neutral ground for talks. China and India, both fearful of nuclear fallout disrupting their fragile rise, pressed both sides to step back. For once, even rivals agreed. Another missile would mean the end. Meanwhile, the reality of Malta's annihilation settled over the globe like a shroud. Drone footage showed the island's outline gone, replaced by a scarred crater and boiling seas. Survivors? None. An entire nation erased in seconds. Vigils spread from London to New York to Tokyo. Millions lit candles, not just for Malta, but for the warning it now symbolized. NATO chose its path. Retaliation would not come in fire, but in exposure. Within days, satellite evidence, intercepted communications, and technical analysis were released, proving the missile had been armed. Russia's denials crumbled in the face of overwhelming proof. The world judged. The launch was real, the intent hostile, the cost catastrophic. Yet the alliance stopped short of war. Instead, NATO declared a permanent nuclear shield over Europe. Fleets were stationed in the Mediterranean indefinitely. Anti-missile systems were rushed to every capital. Article 5 remained invoked, but its answer was deterrence, not annihilation. The message was clear: another missile, and this time the response would be absolute. The resolution was imperfect, fragile, but real. Nuclear war had been averted, by a margin so thin it could barely be measured. Malta was gone, but the world still turned. In classrooms, children asked why an island had disappeared. In churches and mosques, prayers rose for a nation that no longer existed. In military academies, generals studied the Malta incident as the day the Cold War's nightmare almost became reality. And in the hearts of billions, one truth lingered. Humanity had stood on the edge of its own extinction and pulled back only at the last possible moment. The fear remained, but so too did the chance to choose differently next time. Malta was no more. Its name would forever be etched into history, not as a tourist paradise, but as the place where the world almost ended. The lesson was written in fire and ash. Nuclear war leaves no victors, only ruins. Disclaimer: this video is a fictional simulation. It does not depict real events. It imagines how such a conflict could unfold, to explore the dangers of nuclear escalation.